Right, sounds like we're live. Give it a few seconds to count in. And okay, welcome to Lightbox, the official podcast of Wanimate, the West Australian Animation Association. Whether you're an aspiring animator, a seasoned professional, or simply a fan of the magical world of animation, you've come to the right place. And my name is Tanya Beeson. And here we are with all the people who are talking today. So we'll go down the list. So David.
Hello.
Amber. Lindsay.
Hi everyone.
And Anthony.
Hello.
Hi. So, and we'll be your guide in this monthly journey to the heart of animation industry in Western Australia. Each month, Lightbox brings you the latest and greatest in animation news, from upcoming films and shows to industry discussions that will inspire and empower the talented animators who call Western Australia home. We'll also delve into the creative processes and challenges faced by our local animators as they work tirelessly to bring their unique visions to life. So buckle up and get ready to be amazed as we explore the vibrant, ever-evolving world of West Australian animation. This is Lightbox, and we're just getting started. With that, we wish to acknowledge and honour the traditional custodians of the land we are streaming from, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We recognise and celebrate their enduring culture, the rich tapestry of Indigenous arts, and the invaluable contributions they make to the vibrancy and cultural diversity of this city and region.
Cool.
And before we dive into today's content, we'd also like to issue a quick advisory warning. While our channel is generally suitable for all ages, there are occasions we delve into topics or showcase content that might not be appropriate for younger viewers. Look, we strive to create engaging content and for everyone, but please be advised some material may not be suitable for children. So parental discretion is advised. And we encourage you to review the content before sharing it with younger audiences. Look, our goal is to provide a safe and enjoyable viewing experience for all, and we appreciate your understanding and support in this regard. Having said that, let's get started.
Awesome. So straight on to announcements. When I made announcements, first thing you may have noticed is that a joint networking event with the Writers Guild is happening in October, late October 22nd at Roberts on Oxford in Leederville. So the writers will be coming down, having a few drinks and looking to connect with animators and talk about designs, things that you may be able to illustrate or animate for them. And they'll also be looking for ideas from your illustrations and art and design that could potentially jump a story for them. So it's going to be an interesting mix from two distinct skill areas within our industry, and I'm really looking forward to it. The writers can be just as weird and passionate as us, so I'm quite looking forward to that.
Yeah, certainly interesting.
Awesome. Also, on the 26th of October, we've got the Wanimate AGM. The Wanimate AGM will be online on the Thursday night. We'll announce the exact dates and the links. We are running it online because we want as many in the membership to potentially attend as we possibly can. We are talking about showcasing what we do, and having a look at how we reinvigorate, revitalize what we've done, because we're sort of dribbled along a little bit since COVID, and we need to step up our game. Additionally, it's a requirement for us as a registered organization to have an AGM. We haven't had one for a little while. It's a good opportunity to review. We will be canvassing and looking for new committee members. mostly because the people that you see are the grey-haired old people in the industry, and we're kind of looking for younger, more vibrant members to help us, push the organization into the future and maybe give me an opportunity to sleep occasionally.
Cool.
So, yes, absolutely. So let's talk about news. Can we start with the Games Awards?
Yeah, sure. So at the end of last week, the IGEA held the annual Actor Awards. And for those of you who know Caitlin Lomax, we're very proud to announce that Caitlin took away one of the Empower Awards, along with a dude named Dylan. But yeah, Caitlin's been doing amazing things in the WO community for games, and so it was very amazing to see her take out that award. And on top of that, she also was up on stage with the SMG studio receiving the award for Best Gameplay for Moving Out 2. So which she worked on with the studio, so that's amazing news, and we're very proud of Caitlin.
So yeah, Caitlin pretty much spearheaded Games Week in September, and the event, as I'm told from the small amount that I managed to see, and the people that I met, that it was an awesome event. So it's really good to see our games cousins doing awesome things and connecting out there. So anyway, onto the news. Let's talk about sad news.
Yeah, we've got a fair bit this time. Yeah, okay, shall we go through the obituaries that we're going to need to do? Because we've got three big ones.
All right.
Okay, so Arlene Sorkin's passing. So the voice of Harlequin, and in many ways the template of Harlequin as well, passed in the Batman animated series, has passed away. And yeah, it's a voice talent that will be very, very missed. Definitely. We've had Butchie Terasawa, so creator of Space Adventurer Cobra and Goku Midnight Eye, and more. He's passed away recently. And Peter Kazacek, the visual effects and stop motion artist who worked with on animated films by Tim Burton, Henry Selick, and others, and is recognised by an Oscar nomination. Had died in September the 12th. From battle with aphasia at 72. So we've had three, big names in the industry in very different circles pass away. And,
wow.
It's really sad time. The last bit of news is that Prime has ordered 2 seasons of a new adult series, Has Been Hotel. You might have seen some of the designs floating around. It's quite a nice stylized show. So it's got a few people backing it. So it looks like it's going to be fairly awesome series, considering 2 seasons.
Yeah, and it's a good sign for independent animation such as this and Lackadaisy actually getting recognition and moving from just YouTube support to bigger and better things.
Interestingly enough, Lackadaisy and Has Been Hotel sort of have a similar feel in terms of maybe their backgrounds, maybe there's that Art Deco thing that's going on. It's kind of cool. There seems to be a little bit of overlap. And if you haven't seen Lackadaisy, the half-hour pilot / test episode is out on YouTube. And if you've been following it for a while, there's all the documentation of how they made it, the voices, additional animations. So nice, very, very cool. So. And cute. On to the next slide. So, what's happening in the world of upcoming, David?
This is going to be a long one, people, so we're just going to rush through here. Okay, so we've got New Simpsons coming out in October the 11th on Disney.
Season
Jungle Bunch
34.
2 World Tour. Yes,
Is that
season
the one
34
with the
of Simpsons.
striped penguin? Yeah. Sorry, I'm asking
Jungle
questions
Bunch
and
World
distracting.
Tour 12. You are. 12th of October coming out in cinemas. Goodnight World, 12th of October in Netflix. Rick and Morty, I can't recall what season it will be, but 15th of October on Netflix. Thank you. And new voice talent.
Yeah, interesting.
So
Nothing's been shown.
Once Upon a
it's not
Studio.
like because the premiere. Sorry, along those lines, the premiere of what was it? Solar Opposites came out with the new voice actors replacing Justin Roiland. So yeah, so they're out already, and you can check them out.
So once Upon a Studio coming to Disney, and that's shorts October 16th. Japanese Film Festival. So 16th to 22nd of October. Gold Kingdom and Water Kingdom is showing as part of that. It's showing on a couple of days at Palace, I believe. So take a look online to find out details as to what session times are for that, and just in general, any of the film showing at the Japanese Film Festival that interests you, take a look online for that. PJ Masks, Power Heroes music videos. That's October 18th on Disney. Captain Laserhawk, a Blood Dragon remix, 19th of October on Netflix, which ties into our topic this month as far as games. And I kind of hope, I don't know if there is, but I kind of hope Power Glove does a bit of the music for this, because I love the soundtrack from the original. Oink is in the cinemas 19th of October. Big Mouth Season 6, Season 7, October 20th on Netflix. Princess Power Season 2, October 23rd on Netflix. Big City Greens Season 4, October 25th, Disney. Theme Song Takeover, so a series of shorts, October 25th, Disney. Scary Girl, 26th of October in the cinemas. Pluto. So this is the manga series based on Astro Boy that was released a few years ago, is actually getting anime treatment. So that's going to be interesting. And that's October 26th on Netflix. Lego Marvel Avengers Code Red. So it's a special, October 27th on Disney. Onimusha. So that's the series starting on Netflix November 2nd. Unicorn Academy. Again, another series starting on November 2nd on Netflix. Blue Eye Samurai, November 3rd on Netflix. Headspace, November 9th. And that's South African animation. So curious to see how that goes. And finally, on November 30th, Trolls Band Together is coming in the cinemas. So there's a lot there for the next couple of months, both on Netflix and on the big screen. So yeah, looking forward to it.
A big glut of animation. I'm looking to see how they round out Big Mouth, and of course, seeing how they deal with the lack of Justin Roiland in Rick and Morty. But Once Upon a Studio is interesting. The interesting thing that sticks out for me, it's a short Disney short, but it's using a lot of the background characters, and as Mickey goes around the studios, I'm assuming it's a bit of a internal celebration because of the 100th anniversary of Disney. So
and a little cross-marketing synergy while you're at it. So yeah,
freshening up their copyright.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The little screenshot with Hades and Cruella de Vil, and you've got Aurora there as well. So it's pretty cool.
A tour of the Disney Mausoleum sounds great.
And we're saying
So
it a
cynical.
lot now.
So
It's going to be
cynical.
more come December and January.
Cool. Whew. Okay, so
All right.
we've raced through all the news because we got a big topic today. Yeah. And we debated this as to debating, talking about which particular topic. And Lindsay did a deep dive into the origin of animation in games.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, let's talk about that while I load up your other PowerPoint.
Excellent. We got slides. Woohoo.
Where did you send it?
I sent it by Messenger. So you should find the link there.
Sent it via Messenger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also got some high caliber help here from Anthony Carrero, who works in the games industry, so he can fill in some gaps.
Actually, it's worth talking about what Anthony does. And
so, I mean, I'm from animation and visual effects. That's my background.
Yes, you are.
And my origins are very closely tied to this topic, which was like early do-it-yourself computer graphics, early animation, and stuff like that. So I'm a child of the 16-bit revolution, starting off with the Commodore 64 and then heading off to the Amiga. And that's where I got my grounding. So when I got my first job back when we were bumping around with woolly mammoths in the early 90s, I was sagely told by my employer that I was only one of 20 people that knew what 3D was, which was, I thought, a bit crazy. And then about 2 years later, I was like one of 200. So it all moved very quickly. So I'll give you a little potted history of some of the early days, and then we'll probably start bouncing bricks off Anthony's head, and we'll see what he can contribute to some of the other stuff as well.
That's what my head's there for.
Yeah. So would you like to give us a quick introduction to yourself there, Anthony?
Yes, sure.
I
am now. So I'm an artist working currently in the games industry. So I say that because we're all creators, and it's important to somewhat decouple yourself from the industry you're in and not forget who you are, and you're capable of a lot more than your job title and whatever. So I am an art director in games, and I have been for a while. Obviously, originally an artist. Let's just say I've gone through a few of the, I guess, commercial industries, I guess you'd call it, advertising, short film, and games, and obviously print, graphic design, all that stuff that you have to do as a West Australian creative. You have to kind of cover all bases and fill the spectrum out.
Be an itinerant Sydney-sider or Melbourneite.
Yeah, something like that. But you got to pretty much, so I started as a, it's a long time ago. I started as, like most of us do as illustrators, like pretty standard. We can draw pictures, people pay money, who wants to pay money for a picture, and we'll do it, that type of thing. Seeped into advertising pretty early because my mother was in marketing and advertising. So I think a lot of my first circles of introduction to the creative fields were through Ogilvy and Mather, and Ogilvy, I guess they're called now, some early advertising agencies that were here. There's quite a few actually. We had quite a bit in the late 80s, early 90s. We probably had more of a creative industry than we did in the 2000s in Perth, I would say. We had there was Editel, which turned to Double G. There's a whole bunch of stuff going. We had everyone who could do something film or digital or could draw. If you were good enough, you'd get a job and be able to kind of punch above your weight on the world stage if you could find your way there. So it's kind of innovative in that sense. So I spent a lot of time bouncing around that. First introduction to animation was stop motion through those advertising companies. I saw a lot of those things happen, roll up commercials and whatnot. And then, so storyboarding, typical storyboarding for TVCs. A lot of advertising stuff basically was where I was bouncing around, and short film stuff. So that kind of translated pretty well into film. knowing your cameras and your lighting techniques and your staging and composition, all that kind of thing. But while doing this, I was also a fine artist, doing fine art stuff and studying. I actually went to study digital 3D animation because, well, you couldn't really send a clay maquette through the post. So there had to be a better way so that you obviously enhance your ability to fabricate ideas and you end up in 3D. Never lost a passion for 2D. I just didn't have, it wasn't as commercially viable at that time as a market. You weren't being paid the same rates as a 3D person. So you had a choice to make. Whereas the passion, 2D animation was great. And there was a lot to learn, explore and master. The kind of hybrid commercial industries beckoned you across all skill levels to go digital. So that's what happened. Waffling like you, Lindsay. But basically, I love Lindsay, by the way. He's an old friend.
We're fellow veterans from Interzone.
Yeah, we're all veterans. Yeah. Well, that's another story.
We could do a whole episode on that.
Yeah, you need Prozac.
Just make sure the sharp objects are taken away first.
Yeah. Look. So basically, a lot of TVC campaigns and things like that. Later, I ended up teaching actually because I was working part-time and it was a teaching job, and I ended up working for the same place that most of you mob, I think, work, which is TAFE, but at the same time was working in the advertising industry as doing all the pre-campaign art and storyboarding, animatics, previs, all that kind of stuff. I could go forever about that, but you get the idea. A lot of short little projects over a long period of time, put it that way. And then, found my way into the games industry. I'll cut the long story short. Got into the games industry around the first time I walked in was Interzone. That was my first job in games. Having come from film visual effects kind of area with TVCs, I found it remarkably refreshing that people were using technology from 10 years ago.
So it was a bit weird like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It definitely felt like a giant step backwards.
They
despite
were
the programming
discovering
expertise.
stuff we had used to hack into shots 10 years ago. This is World of Warcraft kind of era, 2005, 2006, 2007, that type of thing. So we were people who had that, I guess, animation, visual effects, film experience, and then with the technology involved, had this kind of interesting advantage over not being a digital native, but being able to know where to go to get things done. Whereas people who were kind of in games were still working out how to do things, but we already answered a lot of those questions in the film medium, I guess you'd call it, advertising medium. We had all the shortcuts, we had all the workflows for rapid look development. We had all that stuff. Now we worked with some fairly experienced people, I guess Lindsay as well there, who had a history in games. So that was interesting. There's always stuff. We did
an amateur history in games, but more of a history in visual effects and animation.
Well, yeah. So that's you, right? So you and then me on the more commercial side, but you had that with. Do I mention the company? I have no idea.
Animal Logic.
Animal Logic. Yeah.
And a little bit of Rising Sun, but mostly Animal Logic.
Yeah, Animal Logic. So you had that. And Animal Logic started in TVCs as well. That was the main industry.
Pretty much.
And it still is one of the biggest industries as well. It's not mentioned in the whole games is bigger than film and music thing, because the biggest industry is technically advertising.
It's a bit hard to tell. But anyway, we could go on about that in another episode, I think.
The money gets thrown around, definitely. Anyway, I got introduced to games through there. And then, let's jump forward a little bit. Most recently, Paul Turbot, who's one of the original game developers in WA, he started back when you were playing with early Amiga stuff. Started on the back end of Starhammer Tactics, I believe it was a PSP title. Started Starhammer, which is a game he wanted to work out with Paul Turbot, Anthony Sweet, and myself. Kickstarted into, got some funding and made a turn-based WeGo type of game with narrative and cutscenes and gameplay, strategic, tactical gameplay. It wasn't a big game, but it was big enough for 3 people to develop. And we all had experience. Like Paul's got experience. Anthony was a good writer. I was an experienced art director. It's the way to kickstart the kind of games industry in WA. And then we had a couple of young uns on board from Murdoch. I think Mark Smith, who's now working at Stream West in charge of games there, he was working on that one. And we got offered the chance to and accepted to work on Battlestar Galactica, which was a big deal for me because I'm a huge fan of the 1978 version of Battlestar Galactica. Growing up, watching it on the lounge room floor, big spaceships. It was the TV version of Star Wars. It had all kinds of things in there. It had history and lore and interesting designs and Greebles ahoy on the ships. So,
and a biblical story.
Yeah, and it was. But I thought one day I'll design ships like that. So we got to work on that one, which was fun. Worked with Universal Studios and Slytherin, our publisher at the time, and grow a bigger studio, right? And onwards and upwards. And then we, skipping ahead again, after the success of that and many DLCs and whatever, got Warhammer 40k Battle Sector, which was a story and narrative and game originally inspired by a novel from the Black Library, which is a Games Workshop's literary kind of arm, and that was a really big deal for a Perth shooter to get that from Battlestar Galactica as well. And we started working with that IP, which is really interesting to work with big IPs. Actually, it's quite difficult. There's a lot of people to respect, a lot of things to research, and you can't go in as a novice. You have to spend a lot of hours researching before you actually make stuff and almost become a mini expert before you can step foot in these things, and to be taken seriously by the IP holders and by the relevant investors and such. So we've done pretty well with Battle Sector. It's a good game. It's being well received. It's got a good rating on Steam. We've shipped to all, platforms, apart from Switch. Actually, Battlestar went to Switch, which is really, I don't know how we did that, but we have a clever engineering team. And there you go. That's the story. We grow our staff, our studio, our IPs, and we're still going with Battle Sector. We're about to enter a new cycle, but it's doing well. I don't know if I answered your question. There's a lot of years to cover in a short period of time. But I tumbled my way into games. Actually, I knocked on Interzone's door because I was actually asking about work experience for students at the time.
Oh, really?
I remember that, yeah. And that's actually when I met you, actually, in the lounge.
That's right.
In the lounge area. And I think the person in charge said, "This is Lindsay, an experienced visual effects artist." And I'm like, "Hello, Lindsay."
Hello, Anthony. So what have we got here? I'm the film guy. It's like, whoa, he comes from Animal Logic. Great. What have we got here? Yeah,
every studio wants a film guy. That's what I've discovered. It's like a badge.
I don't know what to do with them, but they do want one. So I just come out of doing things like 2.5 years of Happy Feet, where I've had George Miller and scenes with dozens of lights and cameras and moves and cameras and stuff. And I come to this Interzone and it's like, well, what do we got? It's like, well, the camera's glued to the character's head and you have no control of it. And you're in a world where you've got a sun and one light. Make it look awesome. And it's like, oh, big world. Yes.
There's cheesecake for breakfast if you want.
So I became a world builder. That's how I kept my sanity.
Yeah.
Got ignored by everybody.
I'll tell you what, the in-games, the concept of world builder has changed a bit. And I know that narratively, a lot of the writers take that term a lot. I don't say take, let's just say share to be diplomatic. They share that idea of world building with my attitude's coming through. I said I'd contain it.
I like it. Yeah.
But your job was very important, and because you have a layout background in film, the camera angles, the line of sight, the views, the reveals, everything that's important in storytelling still existed in a game, in an MMO. And that skill
It's just that it's not through the viewfinder; it's through your set design and level layout. That's how it changes.
Level layout, which gets achieved through a character's or a person's avatar's elevation through a scene, or depression through a scene, or traversal through a scene. So those key areas. There's a lot more than film. You've got one shot in film. You've got 67 different vistas to cover in games, but regardless, the importance is still there, and it shows in games like Naughty Dog's games and a few others. Those reveals and those vistas and those things are very important. Depending on the queue, the game may not queue them in with a cutscene or whatever, but regardless, people do notice them. It's all storytelling, right? So I think the key here is that the ability to storytell through a camera or tell a story through a camera is the one skill that traverses all industries. And be it drawing or animating a camera or animating a character, that's probably the most important skill, which can't be replicated by a machine. It's about it's skill, it's person's perspective, it's what they feel, it's the sum of all their experiences that gets put forward, and think this is a good idea, this would be cool, let's do this, and then polishing that's the discipline. So it's interesting. Well, I'm referring to you, but same for me as well. That permeates every aspect of visual medium, regardless what title is on there: advertising, film, games. Animation is part of all of it. I'd say animation crosses all of them. Animation, I mean, it's an animation podcast. That's the commonality between all of them. And that leads to storytelling. So animation is storytelling, right? So
yeah.
I think I talked. I don't know what I said.
I think so. No, I get that. That's totally right. And it is your layout. It's like when you're doing the thing I very quickly learned with stop motion was something, a lot of those lessons. And the thing was, my first stupid little film was a Lego film. And the one thing I worked out very quickly.
It wasn't a stupid film.
No, the characters were small, but they were very limited. And I discovered that half my animation and half my intent and half my characterization and story and what's happening here and who's doing what and who's talking to what came down to my layouts and my cameras and my cutting and my timing. The actual characters could actually sit there inert for like half a second. Then I could cut to another shot. And people would think, oh, there's stuff happening. I get what's going on, even though the animation seemed to be minor compared to laying out the shots and all the stuff.
You did a couple of camera revolves around the things, which was pretty amazing considering where you were in time and what tools you had. Those are pretty seamless for stop motion. You just revolve around scenery, or I don't know if you had a little Lazy Susan and you moved.
I had a Lazy Susan.
I thought you had a Lazy Susan.
And a Lazy Susan that we used to play Scrabble on, and I had a nervous breakdown, I think, every time I shot one, because my film was so tight. I only had a 1-to-1 shooting ratio, which meant whatever I shot, I'm stuck with. So anyway, well, I was gonna. It worked. It sort of worked. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of animation in games. So I'll just refer to my script here. Feel free to interrupt at any point. So starting off at the beginning, computers. Now we're talking 50s and 60s here, and we're talking. One thing about doing this little episode is that when I was going through it, I realized a lot of what we take for granted in animation and computers relies on this vast pyramid of stuff being done. Okay, so we just think, oh yeah, art, we do the stuff, and we realize there's a lot of conventions that are the same. You do digital art, you got Photoshop, layers, masks, pen tools, pens, pencils, erasers, you got vectors, polygons, all that stuff. But most of that stuff started off being completely non-existent. So back in the 50s and 60s, we're talking about computers that are strictly the domain of computer scientists. IT as a concept doesn't exist yet. You're talking about people that make space shuttles or military industrial complexes for a living. So most of the early graphics, strangely enough, the earliest graphic items were things like NURBS and complicated rocket science stuff. Things like polygons were cheap, nasty knockoffs that came much later. So in the 50s and 60s, a lot of displays were either expressed either as an oscilloscope of some kind, like you can see here. Thank you. And or they'd be expressed as something that you'd put on a printer. So there were a couple of early movies or shorts made at this time, but they were nearly always done as things with a plotter. So you can see a little picture there on the left. The guy's next to that giant pool table thing. That's a plotter. It's essentially a large drafting table with an arm or a kind of moving rod with a pen hole in it with a pen. And this thing would draw drafting plans and stuff like that, sort of where CAD sort of evolved out of. And essentially you'd get this thing to kind of generate your frames that way, and then you'd shoot them over a camera, and then you'd build lithos with them and then rear project them, and there's your glowing grid. And so some of this stuff was really primitive, and a lot of it didn't really get going until the 70s, to be honest. But there were a couple of games made there. There was Space War in the bottom right there, and that was essentially an oscilloscope that had two little spaceships, a little Star Trek Enterprise and a little Klingon ship, basically orbiting using Newtonian physics around a black hole as they shot little dots at each other, and the dots would do orbits and stuff like that. So, and I think the middle oscilloscope there is actually a tennis game, kind of precursor to Pong. And what you're seeing is a sideways view of tennis as this little ball bounces around and it plots the trajectory of the ball. I don't know how you'd actually play it. And the one in the middle, the black screen you see there, came out in 1968, and that was called Lunar Lander. You could say it's a Lunar Lander turn-based RPG of how to land on the moon. You basically have, how long do you fire a retro for and at what strength, and it calculates all the numbers and drops an asterisk down on a graph. You have to basically land on the moon without splatting. So, and this is the domain of the big blue thing up the top there. So it's a strange world of mainframes. So, and the thing you're seeing there is that blue thing is a thing called a PDP-10. Now, I used to play on a PDP-11 thanks to a friend who studied computer science at Curtin back in the mid-80s, and it was a strange experience. It really did feel like you're in some kind of science fiction realm, like the raised floors, rooms full of monitors. You'd type in things, wait half a minute as the computer would kind of remember you were there and finally get round to your request, and you'd run these sort of things. So it was very much a land of telephone engineers and stuff like that. But the thing about the PDP was quite significant in the sense that it was the first time a mainframe computer was built as an sort of industrial artifact. That is, most of these contraptions were one-offs built at a building, and essentially the building itself, like the electrical engineering of a building. So the idea of a PDP or something like it allowed people to actually start developing stuff for the first time. And then that sort of led on to this sort of arcade stuff that we saw. So this was sort of like the little early 8-bit computer games. And these are very primitive. Essentially, when you're working on them, you're basically just using a sheet of graph paper and designing a sprite. And so all of these little graphics are essentially static screens, with a few exceptions on the right there, which is more like late 70s, early 80s. And essentially you have a static screen, and some of the graphics are so primitive, they're almost electrical engineering. They're not actually programmed graphics at all. So if you look at Pong, you can almost make that out of actual electronics. And there was something like 2,400 different console games made in the 70s. 2,400. And they were all like, every little man and his dog was building a Pong game, which was like this small, stupid contraption. You plug it into your old TV set, and essentially you'd get tennis or Pong, or they'd have squash, which was like Pong but bouncing off a wall or something, or they'd have hockey. And so they have these variations of Pong. The most complex ones were football, which looked a little less like Pong and more like foosball, where you basically got, the different layers of stuff, and you're just bouncing a ball amongst all these different paddles in groups. It was kind of weird. But they were so small and simple that you could buy one of these things for about $50 down at your local Voxadian store or a Hearns or wherever, or whatever the old chains were. You'd plug it into your television. Everyone would get really excited about it for the first weekend. And then no one had ever touched it again for the next 20 years. So it'd sit in the corner and quietly collect dust. So that was the sort of first TV game that came out. And I think half the reason why we call these things video games and not computer games is because they were originally essentially black boxes for TVs. So the thing that made these things sort of possible was the fact that you had computers that were now starting to be mass-produced, or the same computer in two locations at once, which allowed people to start talking to each other and programming. And there was also another big innovation, and that was things called BASIC and C. Up to that point, a lot of the old stuff was Fortran and COBOL. So it was either Fortran for making engineering problems, COBOL if you're into business. And if you were into graphics, you were probably into tractor-fed printers. That would be the extent of it. So that's sort of where a lot of that computer game stuff comes from. And going through all this sort of kind of dry history, you suddenly realize, I can sort of see how InterZone, the programmers there, are still sort of like when the art world puts its head to something and has to make a film or solve a problem, it gets into there and gets onto it and starts developing new things very quickly. But it can't do that without all this basic infrastructure. You need programming languages, you need shared equipment, and you need a network. And the first networks were starting to appear, bulletin boards. So there's things like ARPANET, which was originally a Cold War government project to, how does the US government not get blown away if nukes hit the infrastructure? Well, it turned out that network turned out to be the that network turned out to be the blueprint for what we now call the internet. And if it wasn't for that network, there wouldn't be people sharing ideas, and none of the stuff would have even got off the bloody ground. So it's
these early games were rendering, logic rendering, and basic physics or simulated physics. So there's three components mainly to them, and rendering was a huge problem, right? So you had line renderers and bit renderers, and then
the raster.
A lot of the graphics being created on graph paper and then converted numerically into the code.
Well, that'll be on our next slide, actually. Put that up.
Oh, bring up the next slide. Cool.
The next slide. So this is probably where Anthony and I started. Right.
Actually, Paul Turbot would be good this one.
Yeah, Paul would be. We should drag Paul kicking and screaming on this as well. So 8-bit. 8-bit's the big one. That's the big breakout. And that's where the 8-bit chip started developing things like the PET computer. So you can see there's a pokey little PET computer. And there was a number of other things that came out as well. I think there was the... where were we? There was the Trinity, they called it, back in 1977. So when Star Wars came out, there were 3 home computers fighting for supremacy. This may sound a bit weird. There was the TRS-80, Tandy Radio Shack 80s, the Model T of computers, I guess. It's so generic that even its manufacturer saw it had no character. It just sat there in the corner and became the basis for a whole pile of knockoffs. There was the Commodore PET, which at the time was a sort of precursor of things to come. You'll notice that green screen on the Commodore PET. The Commodore PET was the first computer I got my greasy little fingers on and did things. And little confession time, the matrix code is based on that screen, that Commodore PET screen. It's 40 characters by 25 characters long, which was the matrix character set. And when the Wachowski brothers or the Wachowski siblings were talking about their matrix code, I was thinking, the way they keep talking about this thing, that sounds exactly like a Commodore PET screen. So I built a Commodore PET screen with code going down it. And they said, yeah, that's it. Oh, that's genius. Like, I'm going to live in this project. Thank heavens. And then weird things happened. The tide changed. The moon blew up. There was a 3-headed goat, and suddenly the matrix turned into this thing. And suddenly I'm walking down the back lot, and there's a shop window full of green code I've just made on everything. It's like, what the hell's going on? So yeah, the very next film I made was completely obscure, and no one knows what it is. Have you ever heard of Garage Days? Yeah, well,
I have not heard of it.
The mountains and valleys of your career. You don't have much control over it. Sometimes you're in the right place at the right time.
The green thing was a winner. The green thing was a winner.
You're on the right place, right time, or you're not. Your skills really just help you take advantage of it when you're in the right place at the right time. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of luck and not luck at the same time. So yeah, and the other big one was the Apple II. So I'm not a real Apple person, but the Apple II is fondly remembered by a huge number of people of a certain age, and it was their first big breakout computer. But the thing I want to get across is that when you were doing computer graphics, you were thinking in terms of, computers, the future, green glowing grids and talking HAL 9000s and the end of the world. And your whole graphics engine was your trusty 2B pencil and a piece of graph paper. And that's pretty much how you built everything. And so what you see up there is a little Space Invader. What you see below it is the Basic Computer Games book. I don't know if you had that one, but I had something very much
I remember that book.
Yeah.
It's hard to forget.
And so we were all learning BASIC furiously, trying to work it out. And so essentially what you've got, if you look carefully at that Space Invader, you'll see that graph paper is exactly 24 squares across, and it's subdivided into columns of 8. And you can see each column is made up of 8 little blocks. Some are filled in and some are not. And if you look very carefully at the top of that sheet of paper, you'll see there's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and 128. And if you add all those numbers up that have filled boxes in, that gives you a number, which you then type into a data program, and out pops graphics. So it was a very indirect, weird, sort of strange, contrived thing. And that's pretty much where I started off. I was an animator that did stop motion, and I was probably the only animator I knew, because there was a young Steve Grant running around in Perth at the time. If you know Steve Grant, he's a bit of a leg end, that guy, and I was the only person that.
Steve.
Oh, awesome work, Steve. I must have been the only guy around town that didn't have walk cycles on my bedroom wall or something. I was doing this weird stuff that no one understood, and I was sort of resigning myself to a horrible fate of being stuck under lights, getting sunburnt, doing stop motion. And then some lovely person invented 3D graphics. I was like, hallelujah, here I go. Stepped on the ground floor and up I went. But yeah, that was what you're seeing here. It was this graph paper stuff was what you used. You could either build sprites with it, or you were building role-play maps with it, or whatever it is you were doing. And that was essentially the beginnings of it. And a lot of the early games, especially on the 8-bit world, would be working on that. So next slide, please. Okay, so now we're starting to get into the 8-bit / 16-bit world. So this is now starting to go segueing from
exciting
early mid-8. Yes,
time.
This is where it starts to really go bonkers. And we still think we've never had it so good. We think completely unaware of what's coming around the corner. So I took a wide selection of things at the time. Now there were several things happening. I guess the two big ones. Well, there's 3 of them. I always thought there's the IBM PC. Now, like the TRS-80, the IBM PC is generic as it comes. Essentially, it looks, feels, and acts extremely terrible. Half the time, it can't find its own hardware. So I knew so many people that had spent literally $15,000 on one of these things for their business, and they'd stuck a little memory chip in it, and the thing couldn't work out what was happening. And it was a horror show. But it has one key, it had a couple of key features that we all totally depend on. And the thing was, it had a dude called Bill Gates behind it. And the thing about that, and Microsoft and their operating system, and the basic premise behind Microsoft was people don't give a shit about the hardware. That was their basic premise. They only care about their data. And as far as we're concerned, it's the art we produce, the libraries we slowly build up over time, and all that. As long as whatever it is you're working on can preserve and maintain that over time, then all is forgiven. No one cares if it looks like a beige shitbox or whatever. So that has made a lot of what we do possible. If we had, say, gone down a console route or something like a piece of locked hardware, like i.e. the Amiga or whatever, then all the stuff that we would have worked on would have been lost once those things had passed. But with the PC, it was able to persist. And that's actually a key thing. So one of the things we drill into the heads of our students, Tanya and myself, is the importance of preserving that data. There's so many kiddies out there that just don't get it because they've just lived and breathed this stuff. Oh, sure, Tanya can give you some horror stories. I certainly can.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have an attrition rate where someone somewhere in our cohort will crash and burn, and we have to sort of, well, kids, don't end up like that, as they furiously try to rebuild their lives. But so the IBM PC turned out to be the winning platform, although at the time it did not seem that way. So
along those lines, Lindsay, when I was in high school, programming in BASIC, I formatted the disk that my programming assignment was on.
We've all done that.
Yeah. So I never had any backups. I learned very early on, which was the mid 80s. And
well, coming from stop motion for me had a very strong appeal. I was very much influenced by the Brothers Key in the 80s and that sort of crowd. I mean, I show the Brothers Key to my students, and they say, "Oh, that looks just like a tool video." And I kind of sit and hold my hands and my head in my hands and quietly weep, really. But anyway, there was something incredibly alchemaic and visceral about stop motion that 3D is only just starting to kind of work out right now. It's just starting to get there after all these decades. But
No, I
the
agree.
idea-
The actual mistakes in stop motion is what appeals to it.
Correct.
It's like the human touch, the error.
It's the
I think
fingerprints in your Aardman films. It's the
Spider-Verse
trouble with,
has kind
Yeah.
of got that the color separation thing, and that.
the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is doing something really cool.
Artifacts, right?
Absolutely.
Artifacts
So
of hand. Yeah.
one of the problems I have with some of the new stop motion films that are utterly flawless is that they're utterly flawless. I'm thinking, well, if I didn't know any better, I wouldn't have recognized that from CGI or not. There's so much compositing going on. There's so much digital grading going on. It might as well have been CGI from the beginning, which it's something I find painful to say. But I need some fingerprints, mate, or some grit or dirt. Even when I was making stupid Lego films, I made a point of finding real Lego, which was Lego that had been chewed by dogs, was ingrained with dirt, had a few dead crayons in there, kind of turning all the white blocks pink. I had a guinea pig skull in mine, so I felt really authentic there. He even turns up in the film, by the way. And screws, nuts, bolts, seeds, the odd dead cockroach, that's a Lego set as far as I'm concerned. And and that's what I tried to put into the magic portal. So that's why it looks like.
Well, it's important. It's important. Sorry, a bit off topic, but that goes back to drawing. Like, I don't believe in erasers unless you're using it as a tool for making marks. And my father always said that to me. He said, never use an eraser because real artists don't use erasers. So that kind of stuck with me a bit. So all the fingerprints you see on art and all that kind of smudges and the way you've worked it, an image moving, static or otherwise, makes a huge difference to the aesthetic of it. And that's something that is not easily replicated. It comes from having a tactile approach or a hands-on manipulation of the image. Now, 3D is starting to get there. You're right, absolutely starting to get there. But that's because people are so sick of the pursuit of rendering. Like, we had to get over
perfection. Yes.
Well, rendering, right? So games is actually coming back to games. It was always a huge thing for them. It's like rendering more realistic. And somewhere along the line, they lost the what we could do with less. So I'm looking at Paint.
AAA.
I mean, what does AAA mean really to people? I mean, if you ask any consumer, AAA means absolute realism and all this stuff. Visual design doesn't so much come into it. It's more about the rendering. I mean, if you look at any game score and any review, they'll talk about the graphics. And graphics is not really what I do. That's the engine that does that. Visual design is what we do. And somehow that's kind of been lost a bit. But I mean,
it's defined and run by rev heads, basically. We have a situation where we find our students, and if there's someone saying, I've got this greatest box and I've got all this amazing stuff and it does this and that and it's got this graphics, I think this guy's not going anywhere. But if some of our best students worked on crappy laptops because they knew what they were trying to do and they got there. So the thing about coming from that stop motion background with all that viscera, so to speak, and then finding myself in the digital realm, I found really disconcerting because there was nothing substantial to it. You could spend 6 to 12 months working your guts out and then one problem, and it's like you never did anything. There's no evidence of it. It literally ceases to exist. So things like the PC, for me, I was like, I can see what they're doing, but and I was a bit of a rev head into my Amiga. So the Amigas arguably invented multimedia.
Well, the Amiga was in a lot of schools in whatever WA as well, like the special art programs, Belcata, Applecross, Kalamunda, but Applecross was the only one who had kind of the Amiga, right, for animation.
Yeah, definitely. And round all the little community groups had them as well. And there's in the 90s that really took off with the video toaster. The Apple Mac, though, I guess could be, I'm coming from the Commodore 64 Amiga trajectory. So everything I was involved with and everything I sort of admired and did and emulated was what you could call the bedroom programmers, the do-it-yourself graphics with graph paper. You sit down and think, shit, how do I work this out? How do I make something out of nothing? Off we go. one of the reasons why I get a little narky about things like Nintendo and stuff like that is that a lot of others, like in the States, and for a lot of people, most of what they did work on or followed was corporate. It was either Japanese Nintendo, PlayStation, whatever, or it was the American corporations making stuff. And they very much a sort of captive consumer consuming stuff. Whereas if you were serious business about the stuff, you were sort of taking the hard road trying to make this stuff work for you. And the way to get into that was through things like the Amiga. To a lesser extent, the Atari ST. That was more for sound people. But you could, the Amiga was the creme de la creme at the time for graphics.
We
if
had paint programs on the Atari ST.
Yeah, they did. There were the Atari and the Amiga were close rivals for many years. I remember my friends. Oh no, it's the Atari.
I felt a little bit defeated when Amiga totally won that race.
Well, it wasn't
hard.
But the Amiga had one fatal flaw. It was bound to its hardware, which meant it couldn't keep up in the end. It was ahead of the curve at the beginning, and then it was way behind it. And when the PC suddenly hit the graphics market with Doom and the graphics cards, it was all over for pretty much anything else.
I'm assuming that's our next slide, is it?
I think you're right.
Oh, Babylon 5.
Right. So this is the 9016/32-bit age. So what we're seeing here is still very on the left. It's still very much Amiga centric. And the thing I want to bring up is the video toaster. Now, the thing about the video toaster was it was like a do-it-yourself, all-in-one black little box for people making their own TV studio. And it was this huge hit. They sold several thousand of them, I think. And it was one of those things that allowed a lot of people to develop their careers without having to be trapped in a large entity like a corporate studio or something like that. So Babylon 5 is the obvious one, and you can see the influence of Babylon 5 through a lot of stuff, even for things like Star Trek and DS9. Arguably one of the better.
Everything is there.
Bang on, absolutely. So you look at a lot of the networked TV stuff, like old free-to-air network TV, it's all very corporate. It's like, 45 minutes. It's 45 minutes because it's an hour long, designed to make the ads, 20 minutes of ads, look interesting. That's really what it's there for. Whereas the people making this other stuff tended to be a lot more passionate. And they tend to be the sort of people that would be probably populating Wanimate or Black Lab Games or something.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of stuff. So in a sense, you've got to separate yourself from your platform and your hardware to some degree. If all the power went down and that's the end of it, well, we'd just go off and make puppet shows in theaters or something. But the thing about the stuff
there's actually nothing wrong with that, though.
No, that's right. That's right.
Puppets are great. Yeah. I couldn't get into.
We're going back into the viscera again, right? So So there's a magic to that. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
But as it was, to make this, so we've gone from mainframes. We've had a brief moment in the arcades, which we're not really. I had a whole pile of notes on the arcades, but the arcades were basically it for performance and graphics and speed and responsiveness. And they were largely made by successful ones, were largely made by people that make pinball machines. And funnily enough, they didn't really translate across back into the desktop market, which I thought was interesting. But a lot of the really interesting games, like, Peter Molyneux, Gentleman Programmer, and Bullfrog, and a whole pile of other characters, a lot of them came from the bedroom programmers, like Will Wright, who did The Sims. He made a little Commodore 64 game called Bungling Bay, I think. It was like a little helicopter game. You just flew around, it generated the map, and you just blew things up. And it was interesting, but boring as hell. And then he realized, you know what? The map's more interesting than the blowing things up. And a lot of these characters started building games that weren't about shooting galleries or fairground entertainments or, stuff like that. And that's where a lot of what we take for granted now comes from, that sort of stuff. So for the PC, the breakout moment was, I guess, arguably Doom, top right.
Yeah.
And that basically gave the speed and power of the arcades to the world's worst home computer, the IBM PC. And suddenly, that was a combination of shared networks,
Don't pull your
shareware.
punches.
No. It's like one of the things that made Doom take off like a rocket, apart from the technical surprise of what it was the fact that it was on shareware. and everyone could democratically jump in and make their own levels for it.
Yeah.
So the fan base instantly got to it, wrote their own level building tools, and suddenly it was the modding community took off. And suddenly there's the PC, large corporate entity, suddenly behaving like the bedroom programmers, except now it's got a vast market, a huge internet, the beginnings of standardization, and it's on. And suddenly the PC just took off like a rocket, and you can preserve your own data.
So
They're doing a new innovative thing at this time as well, because they're actually projecting the textures onto the individual polygons.
That's right. There's a whole ton of stuff that's going down. It put polygons back on the map, thank God. When I was working in the early days, early 90s at Animal Logic and Video Paintbrush, NURBS were the big thing, the old oscilloscope style graphics.
Architectural was polygons.
Yeah, but they were sort of very drawn. They weren't optimized.
The deformation problem, the resolution, tessellation properties of a non-rational B-spline object was obviously to a polygon. Now,
talk to me about PSDD.
I like NURBS. I don't know. I like patch modeling. I found it was more more artistic, I guess, because polygon tools weren't that good back then.
No, they were fucking atrocious.
Resolution wasn't.
Phrase.
Yeah. But don't forget, at 1993, I'm talking about. You've also got Ulterior. You've got Sega Master System 1, which was happening. So you had the TV side of it as well, right?
Yes, the console market was burgeoning, and I think there'll be plenty of people that would wonder why we haven't mentioned any of that. I think in the 90s, it was the age of the PlayStation. Well, the PS2 was a classic in every sense. I think it was the right blend of how much tech you want, how much detail you want of the game, and it had a Commodore 64 vibe about it. It felt accessible.
It was IBM Nimrod. It was IBM Nimrod grey plastic. So the old Nimrod monitors you used to have, you plug in one central piece, one central computer would run all these monitors like you would in a call center. It had that kind of aesthetic. It was very brutalist, and
it worked because your brain makes it work.
Star Wars Empire.
The audience for the games became broader during the 90s as well. So there's a lot more variety of things available. Like during the 90s, my game was like Tomb Raider, probably is the biggest game.
Yeah, first one,
Yeah, but
I remember that was quite a distinct thing. Yeah. See, wasn't it the? Hang on, let's check my notes. That's right. It was the 4th generation: Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and the Sega Mega Drive, and a thing called the Neo Geo, which I never really got into. But I think it was in the arcades, according to my notes, that Sega and Namco were fighting it out, and they were building the first fast 3D games like Tekken and Virtua Racer, and I think the rail shooters like Time Crisis.
That was a great game.
Oh yes, the Atari Lynx. And
essentially, arcades are still alive at this time. Remember that? So people, they were really quite amazing thing. Yes.
That was definitely performance, but you could see that sort of sun was starting to slowly get into the late afternoon for console.
The methods of creating art for each of these platforms was vastly different, though. The PC stuff, was people were dabbling in 3D and learning texturing for the first time, and then you've got the arcades, which are really honing that ability to do awesome sprite animations.
Amazing animations.
Yeah.
So I think you could say it's the golden era of bitmap graphics in some respects. You think of Metal Slug and stuff like that. It's just where they actually build their bitmap to look good on a CRT screen, and there's a whole aesthetic to that. I think on the Amiga they had ham graphics, HAM, 4096 colors, and all these old systems used to have all these hacks to make these colors work, and so people would learn to use the crappy graphic kibble on the edges of their monitors as part of their art process.
The interesting part going into mainstream animation is a lot of animation these days did bring transparency, but the explosions remain purposefully graphic and stylized, much like the original bitmaps were done, because they did it at alpha, right? So it's 1-bit alpha, so you had to have a clean edge between transparent and not. So you had a lot of stylized shapes for explosions, a lot of blue crescents, orange crescents. A lot of these things have made their way into mainstream anime because of that kind of Japanese kind of influence of sprite-based games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Prince of Persia and Flashback, Amber. if you remember Flashback.
Oh, Flashback.
So there's those and Another World. A lot of those.
That's right. The Amiga Another World.
Yeah.
Vector graphics.
Yeah. So vector graphics doing rotoscoping. It's really nice stuff.
Yeah. But essentially, the
Wouldn't
90s.
be a Lightbox chat without talking about rotoscoping, would it?
Rotoscoping has a different meaning for me.
Ah.
Very scarred from rotoscoping.
Rotoscoping's fine.
Oh, not when you're
Sorry,
doing
what
it.
was that, Amber?
Oh, that's
I'm
true.
I'm very scarred from rotoscoping a needle felted puppet. Not so fun.
See, luckily in TAFE we have a thing called Star Wars. So when we're teaching our students rotoscoping, it's like, hi kids, we want you to rotoscope this thing for your post-production course. It's only going to require you to say, please go up to this whiteboard and write 4,000 times, I must follow this shape perfectly on every frame. And of course, you can imagine all the students going, oh, and then you say, oh, it's lightsabers. And they go, oh, lightsabers. And 8,000 frames later, oh man, lightsabers. Oh, well. It's like, thank you, Swords Lucas. Good work, mate. You've made rotoscoping training possible. So yeah,
but it's true that it's true that Prince of Persia leap is always sticks in your brain as like the smoothest and most natural landing, and it's almost Disney-esque in the
were
way
they
it was
not?
portrayed.
Were they not bedroom programmers? Those guys. Yes, they were.
They were. Yeah. Well, anything on PC was not giant, like
That's
you said
right.
before, the giant corporate Japanese engine of computer graphics,
Yeah. And when it suddenly
visual diabetes. But yeah, there was something very different.
Yeah.
The animation respect that Prince of Persia brought was for such a simple game too. It's like running and jumping over things with spikes.
During the 90s, the 16-bit consoles, Disney Interactive started coming out with animated versions of their films.
Aladdin,
like
that was such a good
Disney's
film.
Aladdin on the
Amazing.
Genesis.
Amazing.
So nice.
Yeah, I love that game. Yeah,
I couldn't
Intro
play
as
it.
well.
I tried it
They
once. Just couldn't get through it.
They kept quite a lot of the story through, and and a lot of the detail was there. It was actually really. There was one scene of the cave. I can't remember the name of the cave now.
The Cave of Wonder.
The Cave of Wonder. The way that was portrayed in the game, I'm like, what? This is amazing. Like, this is a console. Like, it's really. It was a good game. It was a really good game.
Yeah.
Great animation.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. So, in the 90s, we see the beginnings of that game stuff. So Doom's the obvious breakout one, although I'm sure the Wolfenstein fans will dispute me on that one. But
Wolfenstein.
Doom definitely broke it into the big league. That's almost like
did,
the Star Wars of PC gaming. And it gave speed and responsiveness back to the PC. It essentially turned the PC into an arcade machine, as crazy as that sounds back then. And hot on its heels, 3 years later, there was Quake. And that was when the first of the big 3D games came out. And that was when the graphics card... console. Oh, sorry, platformer.
Platform. Like Duke Nukem.
Yep. Well, if you take Wolfenstein, or Doom, it's essentially a sideways scroller shooter looking down at it.
Yeah, but things unfold in front of you.
That's right. It's got the same logic as that. And then after that, you might know that the Unreal Engine turns up in 1998. So if you're wondering, I had my students say, 3ds Max is crap, bloody 90s program. I tell them, well, Unreal's even older, pretty much. And essentially, Unreal is a corporate engine. Up until recently, you had to pay lots and lots and lots and lots of thousands of dollars to make it work. And then suddenly, I think with Blender and Unity...
Unity did that. Unity made that happen. Yeah, Unity made that happen.
And then suddenly Unreal suddenly becomes the tool of choice for filmmakers. We'll see how long that lasts.
During the early noughties, dabbling in the original Unreal Tournament engine, that was really accessible because that came out.
You shipped the game, right? You
That's
had
right.
the Unreal Ed came with it, and it was a BSP brush engine. It was a really good
essentially
engine.
they're relying on the modding community to make that stuff for them. And there was a sort of thing in the 90s and noughties where modding was seen as the key part of any game to keep it alive. And if you look at games like Skyrim and stuff like that, that's it's assumed that there's going to be people out there modding the thing to death and doing stuff like
But
that.
you're right, Tanya. Shipping the engine on the disc with the games,
Yeah.
like that, no one had done that. That was pretty amazing to be able to load up the game.
It really got the engine out there. So the first people that I encountered who were actually dabbling in that 3D game space were playing around with the Unreal Tournament engine at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
Amazing.
All right, next slide.
Next slide.
Next
Okay,
slide. So where are we now?
We're on slide 6. There we go.
Okay, so if I'm looking at all this stuff, and here I am in 2023 doing 3D stuff, that's the sort of thing I'm doing. So this is one of the examples.
Anything to get the animated boobs on the screen.
Absolutely. Anti-aliased, I might add.
Yeah, latest version as well.
Yeah. Oh yes, it has all the best crashes, mate. It's really good. Yeah.
The Booleans are all right. The Boolean engines, right?
You still have old Maya 6, or you?
I actually just gave my young artists in the studio my Maya 7 books, and everything I got with the package is the last Maya 6 and 7 one.
My God.
Like,
are you moving on, Anthony?
No. I'm talking about the original Elias Maya books that they're actually collector's items.
Alias Wavefront.
Yes, I gave them to them. No, I'm still on Maya 2024. I'll stick to Maya as long as I need to. I mean, Blender's installed on my home PC, but that's more to train my boy on it when he's ready. But to enter the world of whatever he wants to do. But no, I still
Minecraft probably.
Oh no, he's Roblox. But what he's doing is he's learning lots of stuff. He's a pretty smart little hacker. You can't throw away 20-odd years of Maya experience.
Not easily.
Not yet. No,
well, they threw away my 15 years of Softimage experience.
Well, Softimage is different. We could go into a whole rabbit hole of 3D things here, but we won't. Remain software agnostic, everyone. That's
correct. That's right. So you should always treat your software tools as seasonal fruit. So this year, oh man, Blender is free. And think, great, but don't assume it's going to be like that forever and ever. How many things have we seen pass by like dust, Anthony?
Yes, lots. In ebbs and flows.
Too much. Definitely ebbs and flows. And so nothing is ever constant, and nothing is ever permanent. I mean, 15 years ago, I was talking to people who were reminiscing about the good old days, which I almost pretty much left at the time.
Shake was the best. Shake. Node-based compositor was the best thing.
That's right. Shake. I'd almost forgotten Shake.
Yeah, Shake.
Still using Nuke. Although Apple, yeah.
Apple was, I think the last version was $800 or $400 you could buy it for when it was discontinued. It was amazing. For everyone who doesn't know, it was a pre-Nuke node-based compositor.
Yes, I worked on a thing called Eddie, which is an in-house node-based compositor at Analogic, and then switched across to Fusion.
Digital Fusion.
Digital Fusion was the thing I used for many moons. Yeah.
So I do notice, because tunnel vision 3D guys, right? You missed out on an entire bank of
I was going to bring that up
in the Adobe Animate or the Adobe Flash games.
Yeah, that's a whole internet phenomenon. Memes came out of Flash games.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's the whole noughties. I mean, the young guys I work with now will remember all the freeware sites with all the Flash games you could play. If you remember Frog in the Blender, all those things you used to be able to get.
Monkey Lander.
Yeah. There's huge access to, like you said, study-based artists and animators who could use things like Flash or the other vector programs. I can't remember what they're called now, but there's a few back then. Even Image Ready was something I learned on. I cut my teeth in Image Ready doing sprites and animation. So those types of things could do it. Image Ready. There's a story about Image Ready and my house at the time. But there's I had over 1,000 drawings numbered in the fact I was scanning them in one at a time and hand coloring every frame to make my first kind of digital animation. It was ridiculous. It took me like 3 days to scan it all. But anyway, but yeah, you're right about going back to the Flash 2D software. There was a lot which made things possible. You could, if you could work out parallax, you could pretty much have depth, and then you could tell a story. Like there was a whole bunch of stuff to that. Those were magic things for an animator or artist to be able to do. It's like, hey, I can do Futurama, or you could. If you remember going back to animation, sorry, not games, but it's the same type of thing. I mean, if you look at like Crash Bandicoot or Spyro the Dragon or Ratchet and Clank and all those things, they're the same pool of inspiration that was formed from like Futurama or all these types of things. I would argue that it's the same drive to, I can make shapes look like a cartoon, or I can make cartoons look like 3D. I think making 2D looking like 3D was a big thing, because we didn't know what vertices were when we first started, but we know that there was depth and movement there. We knew what those shadow puppet theater kind of aesthetics could be, what could be done with that, and that was the keys to the kingdom. So yeah, things like Flash and I can't remember, like this earlier program than that, and I cannot remember it now. Even Director.
I played with Director on the Amiga. It was
well, there's really some good interactive experiences that can be done with that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, Tanya, I was going to bring up that as well. Like it was a big thing as well.
It's fine. I'm not that insulted. Okay.
Remember, I'm not such a big. I'm a big 3D guy now, but I am still the 2D artist using 3D. And it's just been a long time that I've been using it. And that's one of the things. If the if the 3D goes away tomorrow, I have no problem. I'm a sculptor and a traditional artist, so I have no problem. I actually kind of really like that hands-on approach to things.
Well, I started in computer graphics in the 80s, doing like the sprite thing that Lindsay was showing on the Commodore 64, and I took that lap. And when I got into playing around with things in the noughties, had a bit of dabble with the Unreal Engine, but Flash was just so accessible. ActionScript made a little bit more sense for my stupid artist brain compared to.
What's object-oriented programming? Right, it's the first one, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was although it doesn't run on anything nowadays, so a lot of my old ActionScript stuff just doesn't happen. But what you gonna do.
No, the fascination of that one person animation studio that those types of Flash, and you could publish them like games, interactive. It's still a pretty big deal. Like that was. I don't think anything really matches that ease of use at the moment. I can't think of anything apart from a 3D engine now. Like I think of Source Engine or Unreal Engine or things that people can make their short films in, like kids just muck around doing like meme stories and stuff like that. I think there's a Skibbity toilet when I was watching the other day. My son was watching on YouTube. I've never heard of it before, but there's a guy in a toilet. But anyway, it's very Half-Life 2 moddy kind of animation. But that is a film tool that people can make animations with modding tools and characters that before you'd do that with something like Flash or you had a camera and a canvas and keyframes and tweening, and how good was tweening, right?
It was great. Interpolation.
Sorry, Lindsay.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess Unreal Engine now. Next slide, please. This will be my last slide. This is where we're at with Unreal Engine.
Oh, okay. So
that now, how long do you think it took me to build that little scene?
Is that Megascans from Australian Megascans?
No, that's the Rural Australia pack.
Yeah, Megascan. Yeah. So
I think it's the pretty. Yeah. So that apart from the level and trying to frickin' decipher the blueprint to make it paintable, that all the detailing that took me about 10 minutes this afternoon.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to a cautious tale of what I said before about the chasing the rendering. Chasing the realism. Now, these tools are very accessible. Megascans, these biomes that I have a friend actually who works for Megascans. He used to work at Blur Studio, a really good map painting artist, but he went there and started working on Megascans tech. Very great artist. But anyway, very interesting, early pioneer type thing. But the ability and now the accessibility for real world scan data is there. And it's good. It's valuable. It's great for layout. It's good for previs. It's good for a lot of things. But I would caution anyone watching who's interested in game design or visual design, Never forget the term visual design. That term is a very important thing. It's a lot you can do to art direct that scene you've got, Lindsay, right? You could go into post-processing, change the mood, time of day, you could go noir,
Absolutely.
you could go anything, right? You could add fog, you could add volumetrics. But and at this stage now, you are a filmmaker. You are essentially a filmmaker in Unreal. So this is no longer about making a game level. It's about layout of a set. Would you agree?
Yep. Absolutely.
You're in that
and so we have a bunch of virtual environment course or units in our course, and it's really like, hi kids, try and get this thing to make something, and oh boy, the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth is just something to behold. It can generate vast amounts of stuff for you, but getting it to do what you want is a shit fight, because you've got to blueprint this and blueprint that and
you can't
mess around with stuff.
Yeah,
it's hard to make stuff without having to spend many months building the raw material yourself.
So I would say that's the same as the real world, right?
Yep.
You're now entering into the territory of the real world. I can't make the real world do what I want without hammering nails and getting paint and hiring people like carpenters to know what to do. You have just said exactly what everyone making a live action film said with Unreal, to get realism, to control realism. So your nature documentaries and all your artistic filmmakers don't have a problem. They make a film with what they see and what they have. They use their artistic vision, their lens, to tell a story and get a mood across. Or
they're effectively reactive. So they're like, they're not florists. They're not flowers that make something from nothing. They're florists that arrange pre-existing stuff.
Yeah, so hunters, right? We have photographers in games, right? People who do virtual photography. They post, and there's some amazing stuff. I scoffed at it originally, and seeing some of the work done for Battlestar Galactica with the spaceships, some of these virtual photographers are really good.
Yeah.
They spot things and frame things you would not do. And I guess going into games now, we're not including game design in this. This slide does not encompass game design.
Nope.
This encompasses a level tool. And
it's more like Archiviz.
Archiviz, yeah. So I think that this is one of the things that is interesting, is that the game design was never about realism. It was about interactive experience, right? And we're going into a world where now everything artistic is now available through a scan data. There's a library here. Unreal's got this mega scan, so Unity's got speed tree. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can happen. I remember teaching a student how to make a tree with LEDs, paint the bark texture by hand and the leaves, and add translucency masks and stuff all painted by hand. That skill is dead, but that was a search for realism. That was not a search for artistic excellence. Otherwise, I'd be doing something probably in 2D or, do you know what I mean? So this long path of 3D, I'm not saying we have to be aware of where we've come from. And back to your early slides from the 90s about searching the rendering, the ray tracing, the shiny reflections, the blades of grass, the hair. Oh, we can do volumetrics now.
Obsession with photorealism that everyone used to be.
So we're there now, right? We've got volume VDBs, which are volume databases for voxel light fluids. You can walk through a tornado in 3D. You don't have to use sprites anymore. Sprites are going to be gone in 2 years. You don't have to worry about it, unless you want to for aesthetics. But
I won't weep. But anyway.
But we're at that stage. So you can. Hopefully, it leads push back to artistic exploration and getting back to those interpretation things. The more we go into computer-generated realism, and I'm touching a bit on AI here, which is where all this is. This is the point where everything kind of comes together. Scan data, AI. That scan data now is digitized. AI can technically learn off that to make the next scan. Like they can make another version. It can give you infinite iterations of a realistic tree now. It's just saying, 6 months it's moving so fast. So now people have got the decision to make is like, okay, do I compete with that, or do I just go back to what was the expression?
I'm drawn to that cartoony look.
Yeah.
The base colors, a couple of shade layers.
Nothing wrong with that. I love it.
No,
I love it. I mean, myself, I'm a cartoonist at the core, a political cartoonist more than anything. But I will never forget the black and white artist skills. It's an amazing thing. Realism. There's two reasons why you go into these fields. Lindsay, I'm hijacking.
Just fine, go for it.
Keep going. You're the expert today, so go for it.
There's 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 commercial and then there's artistic expression, and I think people have to be very aware of why they are doing what they're doing. I'm making games because I enjoy working with like-minded people in a good company, sure, but it's a business. And the business means I won't be making a game for myself. I'll be making a game for a market, for another person. I will apply my own sensitivities and skills to form that as best as I can, inform myself that this will be successful. If it was my own thing, I might not be making a game. I'd probably be making a film, or I mean, like, it depends on what it is. I mean, look, on that note, but the mega scans are really great for prototyping and blocking. And if you're going for film and previs, it has a massive place in film. I think it has a very good place in film. You start realizing though that sometimes you don't actually need locations anymore in some cases. So I believe there's a place for it. I just feel there's a way that students, I shouldn't call them kids, but students use it in a way that makes their game. They're missing out on a whole bit of crafting the world, crafting the vision, crafting the expression. There's no concept, the concept of silhouette goes out the window unless you're talking about composition of framing the whole frame using existing assets. So, rule of thirds, this is more photography, and there's nothing wrong with photography. My wife's a photographer, a really good one. I love the skill of a good photographer. But we're talking about different things. We're talking about artists manipulating stuff to make an image. It's just important to know that what is the goal? Do I want to make myself happy, or I'm trying to, what kind of experience am I trying to form? It's like your signature has a unique curl to it or a flick to it. An animation or a drawing or a painting or a sculpture can have that too. But the realist stuff, that's a pretty stock standard type of font, right? Everyone's going to use that font. It's going to become Comic Sans, right? Mega Scans will become Comic Sans. I think they're already there already. There's people on Steam now already pulling out people going, oh, you've got Mega Scans all the way through that. I use the same thing with that game.
In the same way that graphics designers can spot a Photoshop filter.
Oh, you mean like a lens flare?
Oh, don't talk to me about the Photoshop lens flare. Oh.
Why not? Fantastic.
No, stop. Yeah.
Anyway, it's important.
It's like watching generative AI slowly eat itself. It's like,
well, yes,
it's
the snake. That
look at it.
tail.
It's like, look at me. I'm ripping off the internet, and then 6 months later, what's generative AI riffing off it's riffing off itself now. Oh dear.
It's an interesting thing. I'm not technically against AI. If I had like we use tools all the time. If I could train AI after the last 20 years of sketchbooks, geez, that would save me a lot of time. Yeah. But that's my personal stuff. It's like my own car. If I want to build my own car, or if I want to make my own cake, it's that type of thing. It's not. So obviously, everyone knows about the ethical problems with the AI stuff, which is absolutely no-no to my an absolute no-no professionally and ethically. But I just hope one doesn't stunt because of that. Or at the moment, there's a bit of I don't know where we're going to go with it, but yeah, it makes things interesting. But that's for sure.
Sure does.
It's something I'm playing around with myself, like training an AI on my own drawings. And we lost him. There he is. Yeah,
he's back.
Playing around with training AI with my own drawings, as well as adapting my own photos to old paint styles, like training an AI with impressionist painters like Van Gogh and stuff like that. So yeah, rather than using modern artists, and you just play and try things out and use it as a new tool.
Yeah, I think what was that attitude in InterZone I first came across, where basically using AIs was like discovering a bicycle, and you realize all your life you've been a pedestrian, and so when you use an AI, it helps you get there faster and quicker and makes life a little more easier. I think in the right context, it could help a small team keep up with a large market. But
yeah, I mean, you got to be careful because
there's some potholes there you need to watch out for.
I think there is. We're a small studio. We always cost our stuff. We have freelancers. We have vendors who we use. We're pretty proud of it. There's shortcuts to be made by a lot of people. They can do it, voice actors, whatever, but you can't do that. Yeah, I mean, prototyping is a different stage. But when you go commercial, if you're just mucking over a concept, maybe that's okay. I think non-commercial use or just working your idea, I see a definite place for that. But as soon as you go commercial, you've got to do the right thing and stuff. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you do a map painting, you're sourcing images to do what they call a slap comp for a 3D. You're slapping things down, you're getting some lighting in, you're using whatever you can to get the general mood and movement. Then you end up redoing it all. So that kind of slap comp stage of getting an idea, getting a camera shot going is where I kind of see it at the moment. But it's a rocky road, and it's a very dangerous road. And I definitely think that seen a lot of schools bringing AI into their curriculum as well. There's a certain literacy for understanding what's happening in literacy at the moment, but I don't think it has a place in art schools at the moment. That's for sure.
No. One thing when we were doing Archiviz in our course, we've sort of moved away from visualization and gone more to visual effects now, which suits me fine. But we did discover we had a third type of students. We used to have the 2D students that used to work with Tanya's classes and struggled in the 3D ones that I was doing. And then there were the technical dudes that thrived in 3D and then, would freak out when Tanya told them to do a stick figure. And then we discovered we had a third type of student, essentially a photographer. Getting back to that game photography thing you were saying.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
And these were people that couldn't draw in Tanya's class, could barely get anything done in my 3D technical classes, and then suddenly they came to life when they had to do a big architectural visualization. And the usual thing you'd hear would be, oh man, I can make my dream house with this. And they build this fabulous palace of a place with this kind of modern technical, and then they just get in there with the modern renderers and they've essentially built a kind of photoreal fantasy world.
Well, it's the way it's presented, right? It's, understanding
and
form and light.
They were using all their, I was essentially using the conventions of photography.
Sensitivities.
And so it was more of a reactive artistic response to that rather than a creative, like build by creative. I mean, it's all creative, but by creative, I mean, they started with absolutely nothing and you could draw a picture from scratch.
They wouldn't have been given time day 200 years ago, but I understand that. Yeah, so like...
we had a similar collision in some of the films that we worked on in visual effects. We'd have live action people collide with animation and visual effects people. So the live action people would come in and wonder why we couldn't just conjure something out of nowhere. And we'd tell them, look, we start from nothing and we have to build our actors. Where they were just used to having Kate Blanchett turn up and go, oh, I'll need an Elizabeth I, please. Oh, here we go. Plop, Elizabeth I. Do it again, but this time, try this.
But on those old film crews, think about...
We're going to be murdered by film people.
That's okay. We're film people. It doesn't matter.
We're film people too. Other film people.
Look, we're not talking about riggers or gaffers or best boys. Those guys just do their job. But we're talking about, and like, I don't really care what a first AD, a third AD, and a fourth AD think, But if you're talking about a cinematographer, a focus puller, a director, or those guys, they're going to agree that there's only a few people who need to have creative control over a film. The rest just are ants making the thing happen, and you can't have too many Indians. Too many cooks. What's the saying? Too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
Too many cooks spoil the chief.
Something like that. What I'm trying to say is, so singular creative visions with, there was the technical barrier you have to deal with in computer graphics, and that technical barrier, I'd say, slowed a lot of us down at the time who were creative, but had to get over this immense digital barrier first before we could actually start making something. And if you think about your teaching 3D, you're going through dual concept design, do the topology, do it correctly, then rig the character, and then get the IK constraints going, and then animate to the right, and then get your camera conventions. There's a whole bunch of steps to go before you even get something on the paper or print it out to film. And that was like a who dares wins type of situation back in the day, because you get paid a lot of money for it as well.
Back once.
Well, it was short. And
back when it was glamorous.
Now it's as common as anything. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Look, everything's cyclic. This gets reinvented. Some things are constant, like the ability to express yourself visually, regardless how you do it. And I think having a message always helps. And that's why I come back to. And by the way, artists are writers. I see a lot of artists who become. This is one thing that really annoys me. I'm going to use this forum. I'm going to use this soapbox. Okay, artists.
Here it comes. Hard hats on, everyone.
The problem is
safety
that
goggles.
they're not trained to express themselves in like writing as well as visuals.
Yeah.
We tell stories through pictures, right? It's a language, and sometimes people come along, take that picture, and put words to it for you, and call themselves a writer. And it happens in storyboarding, it happens in concept design, it happens all the way through, it happens in animation. So it's important for artists to realize that you can sometimes put a blurb or a synopsis to your work to try to describe it with words, because otherwise someone will put words to your work. So practice the narrative generation, understand why you draw that picture or animation. There's a story in those trees in the background. You thought about it when you drew those trees. Describe that, because someone else will otherwise. There is a reason why you made this rock that shape, romantic form, hugging this character. Describe that. Describe that with words and with drawings, because you are a storyteller. Well, yeah, be able to sell it as well, because remember, storyboard artists had to get up there and animate and act out their storyboards to directors and all kinds of people before too. Getting introverted, now there are introverted artists out there, but I know it's hard, but people have to learn to come out of their shell and sell their ideas as well as their visuals, because there's a lot more design and narrative in that image that most people will ever give you credit for. In fact, they don't want you to. They'll be quite happy to take that image and run with it. So remember, artists are writers as much as anyone else, not in the traditional sense of writing, but definitely storytellers is what I'm talking about. And I don't see a division, because back when we started to be artists, or what it was, my dad always said, you've got to be good at biology, engineering, you've got to be good at storytelling, you've got to be good at everything. You have to be an artist. Let's put your pencil down right now, forget about it. So tick, 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 tick. Many years later, okay, that's what I've got to do, that's what I've got to do. You've got to be technically minded. Artists are technically minded, by the way. People always say we're not. We're doing a lot of calculations per second drawing a picture. So get that out of the head too. Pattern recognition is a huge deal with artists, right? That's a very technical thing. AI is only just now catching up to. So I think embracing these concepts and having some pride on a student level, students should have the pride, be able to sell their story and what they want to do, more than just saying, I'll let my picture speak for myself, and if someone likes it, I'll be hiding in the corner until someone says yes. Get out of the damn corner. It annoys me to see people so, David, what are you going to say?
I find it a little frustrating that we've got a lot of students and a lot of people these days that just get into learning one style of drawing. They stick to it, and suddenly they're doing only memes or only that character's fan art.
Yeah. What's an age thing?
Yeah. Well, one day they'll suddenly not be cool, and it'll all be over. And that day it's probably a lot younger than it would have been in the past.
If you haven't had experiences, you've got nothing to talk about. Right? That's so the thing is about that is, if you spend a lifetime behind a box thinking about what you're going to make in the box and not knowing what it is, so you watch some YouTube, you haven't got experiences. So you need to kind of go on holiday or walk in a bush or avoid the snake biting you on the leg. You might. It doesn't matter what it is. There's lots of things that
an adventure.
You have to have something in your head to be able to get it out.
Yeah.
So maybe a lot of these things are because of sterile environments influence our creativity. Sterile environments would be something like you're watching YouTube or whatever all day or something like that. So life experience is important. As much as we don't want some of our experiences, they form us and they make stories. So that's important to give. Now, so like if a student said, no, I've thought about this a lot. I was a lecturer for 11 years, but the thing about it is that if students don't have ideas, you've got to show them ideas. And maybe I'd change the way I taught today if it was working for a different company or whatever, but definitely think that getting out there and getting some interaction with different types of people, different types of experiences, different types of entertainment. Have you seen performers? Have you seen people on stage? Have you seen buskers, how passionate they are? Why aren't animators as passionate as that in student? Because those guys are they're cold to it. They have no inhibitions. They're animating themselves. And if you could just capture and film that and animate that, you'd understand a little bit of what drives old school animators. Old school animators were like that. They were like that. They were out there. They were professional, but also artistic. They're the best between a filmmaker and a traditional artist. And that's kind of what was cool about it. So, I mean, any student that doesn't know what to do, go and watch some buskers and talk to them and see how loud they shout at your face and feel the intensity and that colorfulness. And that's a life experience. Yeah.
Find the love is what I say to my students. You've got to find something that you love about this job or it'll eat you up.
Yeah, it does. It does. It gets worse when you have to do it for a living. Your hobby becomes your.
There is no escape.
But I mean, by then, I mean, you always you're still thinking about where things are going. It's always an ongoing journey, right? There's different stages, many different stages. I don't know what the end stage is. I have no idea, but it'll be interesting.
There's an end stage? Oh. I'll have to start eating my tail.
We have gone for an hour 40.
Yeah.
So
Good God.
let's talk about wrapping us up.
Yep.
So
There we
any
go.
final words on this topic since you started it for everyone, Liz? What do you got?
Oh,
Yeah.
well.
We didn't even talk about games animation, Liz.
Well. Got as far as the stage, I think. Didn't even get to the props or the actors.
Didn't even talk to FK and IK and mocap and facial cap and keyframes and smear frames in games and all this kind of stuff. Not that I want to talk about it. Yeah, that's the thing. Like for kids, like League of Legends started bringing in smear frames into their character animations, works really well. The rig was, so it's actually really good. It makes a big difference to animation. It gives you that kind of really squash and stretch. The secondary. So it's interesting to see game studios are starting to, when they allow the room for animators to actually be creative with how they do things, they're pulling a lot of these old traditional techniques into newer, more stylized games. And what are you going to do? You're going to look to the old masters, how things used to done, and it works. It works well. I mean, Ratchet and Clank, those types of games, Insomniac did. They had great cinematography. They basically could be feature films. Well, I think they did make an animation of Ratchet and Clank for Netflix? I think they did.
They would have made some quick to video things, I'm sure, back in the day.
I think it was recent, but anyway, look, I think that the narrative. Let's just talk. I'm going to add something really quickly here. The narrative of animation or animating things in games is still going strong, right? It's not stopping, and people are getting more and more advanced in it. Technology has caught up. We can start doing some things. A lot more indie studios are going forward. There's some great, crazy stuff going on. There's a lot of styles to pick from, to draw from. Look at this, the Dungeon experience. I just looked at it the last week, but like Simon Boxer and J.P. Janurka's crazy characters and kind of very low poly cartoon aesthetic. Those types of things, there's still room, and they're very successful. They create industries, they create cults, they create cultures. There's so many Australian games at the moment doing alternate styles. It's quite amazing. So, and none of them are really using mocap. They're all hand animating. So it's kind of interesting that the thriving industry of indie that we have here still better to get that. We don't need the high-end technicality of the big studios. We're in that right kind of middle zone, that Goldilocks zone for animation and story to exist with gameplay. That's actually what it is. It's literally a narrative Goldilocks zone for everyone. That's where high-end indie sits in the games industry, I think, in Australia right now. Sounds good. Yeah.
I like it. But I mean, it's I guess one of the most frequent questions I ask my students is when they're struggling with something is, well, what are you trying to say? And then you basically got to express it. And all the rest follows.
Okay, well, has anyone else got any final words to add to talk about games? Amber, you're working on a game. You're sitting there quietly.
Amber, you're working on it?
Yeah, quietly.
Well, I literally just wrote a thesis on revitalizing traditional handmade practices.
That's very interesting.
I'm very passionate about new technology, but also still drawing upon the past and not forgetting the past, because I believe that's where the creativity really flourishes.
Yeah, spot on.
And I'm a lecturer, and I see a lot of students relying too much on just all the presets and the tools that are in there. That's concerning.
Well, do we bring back portfolio entry to schools? Ooh, that's a good
one.
I'd like that. That way you're controversial.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy's very seductive, isn't he?
I love that level. I love that level of pressure to put on them. Yeah, absolutely.
Look, I think you need a high bar for them to jump over.
I actually think it's necessary myself. That's my personal opinion.
I think you're right. Otherwise, you're just going to have an attrition rate through your courses.
So you'll get away from the presets pretty fast, Amber, wouldn't you? You get straight to the, I want to tell a story. Help me learn how to tell my story. That's what we used to have before when we were lecturers.
Like even texturing now, it's just like, oh yeah, I got a preset from Substance and dumped it on. I'm like, well, that's not really.
Yeah, every mark is a story in texturing. Yeah, well, see, like that's the thing, right? Well, if you tell them that this eyeball has to hold up to 4K on the cinema screen, we'll see what happens. They have to start making marks that mean something. If you said this piece of metal is going to be zoomed up and a bug is going to walk across it, then they can start thinking about that shot. This is where I think shots were important in film, need to come into games more, because it gave that piece of metal, you have to tell a story on that piece of metal. Because the camera's right up in it. Like, you have to tell a story on that metal. That metal can't be a generic piece of metal. It has to have a Band-Aid on it, has to have some scratches, like, you know, TR loves AC or something on it. It has to have some chewing gum stuck to it. There's all this stuff that has to happen to that, make that piece of metal interesting on a big screen. So games needs to get, you know, texturing is about storytelling. That's kind of where I challenge them, is to make that thing interesting. But they won't listen to you.
Just on the topic of animation in games, it's really interesting to talk to people when mentioning animation. I think so many people just think it's cutscenes and just characters running around. Yeah. And there's so many other elements like the props and the environment, reactions to things, unplayable characters that react. Like there's just so many things, even songs in Grand Theft Auto, like into the walking. And so they just don't consider it. And so you always hear people talking about the 12 animation principles in terms of like an actual animation. But you never get anyone talking about it in a game environment, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. We do a lot of animations. We've shipped a lot of armies in Battle Sector, and every one of those is hand animated. And I think in general, there's ranging from 15 to 17 different types of units, from very small bug-like creatures to huge demons with bat wings. So all of them are animated, and there's no reference for those things. So you have to interpret reference and research and do stuff, and you have a very small period of time to animate them in. So there is definitely like Josiah Ward, who does a lot of our animations. We all animate, but he's the bulk of it. He hit the ground running with that, right? He bought the Animation Principles book, but it didn't help after a certain point. Eyes and photo reference and video reference started to come in, and then interpolating that up into a different creature was very important. But it's definitely a process and a mindset. You cannot be interrupted, and you definitely have to be in the zone to get it right. It's a mental discipline involved, and you have to know what you want to get out of it. So, yeah, it's a big thing in games. Like, animation is huge. It's a big part of it. Yes, you Miximos, and I don't know what else there is out there. I have no interest in it. But basically, you're better off doing your own animation, because you can get exactly what you want, and it's performance. So in games, performance is a big deal. So we can limit, going to 3D again, we can limit the amount of vertices controlled by a joint. We can compress our keyframes. We can repeat. We can do loops. It's all about design as well. It's an animation design and combat design as much as it is about animation. Cutscenes are what the glamour is, but we don't have any cutscenes in Battle Sector. We have concept art with voiceovers. Most of the animations in the game itself. So it's a huge thing, and it comes down to just biomechanics, understanding body mechanics, gravity, weight. Secondary animation is obviously huge in games. Like, you use everything is draping around and flopping around. It's crazy. But weight is the big seller. You get a character with really big forearms and really big stompy feet, but a skinny body. They're the best characters to animate, because they got big gorilla arms to kind of throw around, and get a really good lumbering walk cycle going. And, those types of things I put in my own cartoony silhouettes, because I really like the idea of the weighted limbs, and the rest can be kind of more. And it really helps with animation. You exaggerate them a little bit too. Space Marines in Battle Sector actually sell that quite well, because they got huge, big, clunky feet and huge, big pauldrons. But you can play around with the weight quite a bit.
Dreadnoughts must be the.
I love dreadnoughts. I love dreadnoughts. I love dreadnoughts walking backwards, because it's so awkward and it's great. The clunkiness of it. So yeah, they're great. Dreadnoughts are like
Excellent.
metal coffins. If anyone wants to know, with legs and guns attached to it. Fantastic. Anyway,
A dead
There you
fanatic
go.
stuck in it.
There's
That's
someone
great.
who enjoys his job. Yeah.
True.
So I guess I
Okay,
won't see
well-
you making. I guess you won't be making an Animal Crossing game anytime soon, there, Anthony.
you know what? I'd happily make an Animal Crossing game, Lindsay. I would happily
Okay.
take that challenge.
Yeah.
I would
But are they
happily do
big
it.
and stumpy? As long as they're elephants or something. I mean.
No. Anyway,
Get some gorillas or something, it'd be fine.
yeah. Well,
Cool.
that's fine.
Okay, we've officially made the longest
Good.
podcast ever.
That's Lindsay's fault.
It took
Yeah.
a while to get warmed up, but we got there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but thank you very much for popping in and chatting with us.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Next time it will be November. And don't forget, we've got the
AGM.
meeting the Writers Group and Writers Guild, and also our AGM coming up. So also check out the tons of things that are coming out soon in all the local cinemas, Japanese Film Festival. Yeah, it's going to be fun, and we'll probably see you out there in the world. We got a clap. Someone said a clap. Aw.
Oh. Did we clap back or what?
Whoever Facebook user is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Cool.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us, Anthony.
No problem. Very good. Happy to be here.
Coming in and spilling your wisdom and telling us stories.
And kicking heads all at once. It's a good.
Oh, that was quite tame.
You were. You didn't really.
Because David said family friendly, so I went okay.
Yeah, but the parents get to review it first, so that you're out.
Yeah.
I'm a parent.
We've covered Fritz the cat. And,
Our clap.
Ralph Bakshi.
Our little clap was Caitlin, who is sitting in the background listening to us.
Oh, really? Congratulations, Caitlin.
Yes,
Nice work.
congratulations, Caitlin. Thank you very much.
Good work. Keep it up.
Excellent work.
So,
All right.
Standing ovation of one. We've never had it
Okay.
so good.
So I'm going to sign off the podcast. Thank you for me. And
Good.
thank
see
you
you from me.
It's nice to meet you all. And Lindsay. Nice to meet you too, Lindsay.
Oh, good to meet you too, Anthony. It's like I've known you from somewhere else.
Yeah,
I can't place
strange.
it.
Strange.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you one and all for putting up for this. And I guess we'll see you until next time. Farewell.
Adios, amigos.
See you later, animator.
See ya.
Bye.